Winning a World Cup once already places a player in a category almost no one reaches. Winning it twice is something the sport has never seen in the modern era, and yet, 4 years after Qatar, the idea still refuses to disappear. Because when you look at Lionel Messi, it doesn't feel like the story is fully finished. So here's the thought that shouldn't even make sense. What if Messi wins the World Cup again? Modern football does not allow repeat World Cup winners anymore. That isn't an opinion. It's the result of how the tournament and the sport have changed. In earlier eras, continuity was possible. Squads stayed together for years, players played fewer matches per season, and tactical preparation was far more limited. When Brazil won in 1958 and 1962, most of the core played domestic football, fitness demands were lower, and opponents had limited footage, data, and scouting tools. The gap between teams was wider, and surprises lasted longer. That world no longer exists. Since then, defending champions have consistently failed. Brazil couldn't repeat in 2006 despite arriving with Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Kaká, and Adriano. Spain collapsed in 2014 after dominating world football for 6 years. Germany exited in the group stage in 2018 as reigning champions. France came close in 2022, but even they couldn't finish the job. These weren't weak teams, they were exposed teams. The 4-year gap now works against champions. Players age out of peak condition, club football drains physical reserves, and every tactical detail gets dissected. By the time a champion returns, opponents aren't reacting anymore. They're waiting. The World Cup doesn't reward dominance. It rewards survival at the right moment. That's where Lionel Messi becomes a problem for logic rather than a hero of the story. He already won the one trophy modern football usually allows you to win once. For almost everyone, that moment closes the arc. Comparisons to Pelé don't solve this. Pelé played in a football ecosystem with fewer matches, less pressing, and far less tactical scrutiny. Modern football shut that door decades ago. So winning again wouldn't just mean beating 7 opponents. It would mean overcoming a tournament structure that has repeatedly destroyed champions before him. This is no longer about belief or emotion. The real issue is why this idea hasn't already been dismissed as impossible. And yet, 4 years later, it still refuses to go away. Not because of nostalgia, but because something after 2022 didn't feel like an ending. Qatar 2022 didn't complete Lionel Messi's story. It removed something that had followed him for most of his career. For years, every World Cup match felt like a trial. Finals lost in 2014. Penalty shootouts. The weight of comparisons that never stopped. Club football had already settled his status, but with Argentina, every tournament reopened the same argument. By the time he reached his mid-30s, Messi wasn't just trying to win games. He was trying to close a case that never seemed to end. You could see that pressure even early in Qatar. Against Saudi Arabia, after the opening loss, the tournament could have collapsed around him like it had before. Against Mexico, with Argentina on the edge of elimination, Messi didn't chase the game for 90 minutes. He waited. One moment, one strike from outside the box, and the entire tournament shifted. That was the first sign of something different. From there, his approach became increasingly controlled. Against the Netherlands, he didn't dominate the match physically, but he dictated it emotionally, slowing the tempo, picking moments, deciding when to intervene. In the final against France, he wasn't everywhere. He didn't need to be. He appeared when the match reached its breaking point again and again. Once the trophy was lifted, the pressure vanished instantly. Not slowly, not over time. The debate ended, and with it, the need to constantly justify himself. That's when Messi became selective. He stopped forcing involvement, conserved energy, and trusted the structure around him. This is what people miss about decline. Some players fade when pressure stays. Others become more dangerous when it disappears. Messi now plays without legacy anxiety, and that changes everything, which shifts the focus away from him entirely. If he no longer has to perform miracles, does Argentina still work? The idea that Lionel Messi is still carrying Argentina no longer matches what's happening on the pitch. Under Lionel Scaloni, Argentina stopped being a team built around rescue moments. The midfield triangle gives constant protection. Rodrigo de Paul handles the pressing and ball recovery. Enzo Fernandez controls tempo and progression. Alexis McAllister links phases and arrives late into the box. That balance keeps the center stable so the game doesn't collapse onto Messi's shoulders. Out wide, Argentina now has direct outlets. Julian Alvarez presses relentlessly and stretches defenses vertically. Nicolas Tagliafico and Nahuel Molina provide width without forcing Messi to drift wide to create space. The workload that once drained him is spread across the squad. This changes Messi's role completely. He no longer drops deep to organize buildup or tracks back to reset structure. He waits higher, reads the rhythm, and steps in when the match needs a decision. Long stretches can pass without him dominating the ball, and Argentina remains in control. That's the key shift. Messi is no longer a lifeline. He's a finisher of processes the team sustains without him. Tournament football rewards this kind of balance. Not constant brilliance, but protection around the one player who can tilt everything with a single touch. But systems don't stay fresh forever. They age, they get analyzed, and eventually they're tested. Which is why history still looms, because champions almost never repeat. When Lionel Messi arrived at Qatar in 2022, he still had something modern champions rarely keep for long: uncertainty around him. Opponents knew his quality, but they didn't know how Argentina would structure itself around him under pressure. Scaloni's system was still evolving, roles were flexible, and Messi's exact function changed from match to match. That ambiguity mattered. It bought him time and space that usually disappear after a title. That advantage is gone now. Every major opponent heading toward 2026 is building game plans with one objective in mind: limiting Messi's influence without collapsing defensively. His positioning, his preferred zones, the moments he chooses to accelerate play, all of it has been logged, replayed, and tested. Argentina won once by being adaptable. The second time, adaptability becomes harder to disguise. Age compounds that exposure. Messi doesn't need to decline dramatically for this to matter. He only needs to lose half a step, one recovery sprint, one extra touch under pressure. At this level, those details don't reduce quality, they reduce margin. This is the part history doesn't show clearly on paper. Champions don't fail because they forget how to play. They fail because the advantage they once had quietly disappears, while everyone else sharpens against them. Messi is now defending success rather than chasing it. That changes how opponents approach him, how matches open, and how risk is managed around him, which makes the situation more fragile than it appears. Because if this advantage is gone, then something else has to replace it, and that leads to the real tension ahead. By 2026, Lionel Messi will be 39 years old. That number isn't poetic, it's a variable football has no clean data for. There's no historical curve that tells you how a player like him behaves at that age, on this stage. Not in terms of talent, but in availability. The real uncertainty isn't whether Messi can still produce quality, and it's how often and under what conditions. How many minutes he accumulates before the tournament matters. How often his body is pushed through full seasons matters. Whether he arrives fresh or protected is still unknown. What makes this different from past cycles is that Messi no longer needs to carry volume. The question is whether he can peak selectively. Can he be managed so that his highest intensity is reserved for specific phases, specific matches, and specific moments? Argentina's structure will decide that. If the system shields him properly, his influence doesn't need to be constant. It needs to be precise. World Cups aren't won through dominance anymore. They're won through timing, through moments where a tournament turns on a single action. Messi doesn't need to be the best player across 7 matches. He needs to be decisive in 5 or 6 situations where the game tilts permanently. Context matters here too. Argentina's group stage in 2026 is unlikely to demand maximum output from him. That lowers immediate risk and increases the chance that his energy is conserved for the rounds where margins disappear, which is why this remains unresolved, because if Messi can arrive healthy, protected, and properly timed, then the impossible stops looking unrealistic. And that leads to the real question nobody wants to ask: what it would actually mean if he did it. If Lionel Messi were to win the World Cup again, it wouldn't register as just another trophy added to an already crowded resume. It would change how football evaluates achievement itself. 2 World Cups in the modern era wouldn't end debates because of sentiment or popularity. They would end them structurally. The argument wouldn't be about style, teammates, or eras anymore. It would be about limits, and the fact that one player crossed the hardest boundary in the sport twice, under conditions designed to prevent repetition. This wouldn't be about outplaying slaying rivals or collecting accolades. It would be about rewriting what football quietly assumes is impossible. The World Cup is built to resist dominance. It fractures champions, exposes systems, and punishes continuity. Winning it once is an outlier. Winning it twice isn't supposed to happen anymore. That's why this wouldn't validate Messi through luck. It would do the opposite. Luck doesn't survive repetition. Randomness doesn't align twice across 4-year cycles. Different squads, different opponents, and different physical realities. If it happened again, the explanation wouldn't be fortune. It would be inevitability under pressure. For Messi, that would mean something unsettling. His career wouldn't just represent excellence within the game. It would represent a breach of the game's own constraints. A player doing twice what modern football allows you to do once. And that's why this question won't sit comfortably, no matter how unlikely it seems. The question isn't whether it's likely. The question is why it still feels possible. If you enjoyed this kind of breakdown and want more football stories that go deeper than highlights and headlines, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments, not what you hope will happen, but what you think. Can Messi win the World Cup again?